So do you have a specific goal, like how much the increase of the employment?
You know what? The goal is less a function of exactly how many numbers. The goal is more to change the philosophy, or try to push the philosophy or the principles of what's been going on in state government. And the principles, if we talk about education, I want the conversation to be focused on the children and the educating of the next generation. I have 4 children myself. I'm a product of public schools. I believe in public schools, and I believe that we need to support the public schools, but the responsibility is not just with the public school teacher and the administrator and the management of the schools. It also belongs to the parents and the students themselves. And we all need to work as a community to make sure that the schools do as well as they can. That means the parents have to help the teachers, and the teachers have to help the children, and the children have to help themselves. And they have to be, sort of aware that they have to be part of the process. And I think if that happens, you will see that increase and that everything that we want, which is sort of the increase of the test scores and the increased, I'd say, capabilities of the students coming out of the public school systems in this area here.
How do you achieve that, involve the children and how do you achieve that? You say involve the parents and the children.
Yeah, I think I'm a believer in sort of human nature. And so people act, and I think it was when I was at the University of Chicago, Professor Becker won the Nobel Prize for basically spending many, many years proving that people within their family, children and parents, act in a sort of risk-reward way. So if I choose to come here and say something in this interview, for example, and there might be some risk or reward in saying that, and I have to make that calculation with respect to what I do. When I cross the street and it's a busy street, there's a risk reward, and you sort of act accordingly. I think that the children act that way in school. I think the parents act that way with respect to the education process. I think teachers act that way. So if there's no incentive to be, to measure the active progress of the children in the schools, which a lot of school systems now have sort of an active management as to how well the various teachers are doing, things like that. I think that has to be implemented, and it's less of a function of being a penalty for teachers. It's more of a, in my way of thinking, it's more of a reward for the teachers to say, okay, this is working. This teacher is doing well. This method is working. And the children should know. The children should be able to see their increased proficiencies over the year as they spend time with a very good teacher versus just an average teacher. Those are things that I think end up in the real world. If you are working at Kraft Foods, or if you're working at McDonald's and you're working at Motorola or Allstate and all the different businesses around this district here, people are measured on how they do, how hard they work, how much they perform, or how well they perform. That type of stuff is, I just believe, is human nature, and I think that's probably a good thing.
Like provide them the incentives.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, the American dream for me, I've sort of lived it. My parents had a dream for my brother and me when they came here to the States. And I've been blessed. I lived with my grandparents, with a Ye, Nanag, and Wagong. They all lived with my parents for many years, and my family for many years. And I think we've been blessed with the American dream. And if I can help be the next step, that first Asian, whether it's for a Japanese girl or a Korean boy, to see that there's some ability to rise up and represent a district, or represent a district like this. Very, very diverse, 17% Asian, but that 17% is, like I said, Indian, Pakistani, Assyrian, and Japanese, and Korean, and Chinese, and Filipino, and all the different Asian cultures, all in that number. And then the balance of the people here, you know, who maybe don't see me as an Asian, but see me as a business person who's done, you know, the hard work to get to where he's gotten in life, and a lot of it having to do with my background in finance, to see that I can make a difference. And my friends who I've coached, you know, with whom I've coached football or basketball, or, you know, all these parents that I know through the network of parents for all 4 of my children, you know, I'm proud that I've gotten so much support from the local community, and so much of the support is actually from people who know me, not as a politician, not for my political party, but for me and my wife and what we've done in the community with the parent organization, or working with a not-for-profit, or Cub Scouts, or YMCA, or those types of things.
Okay, the last question. I see that why do you say it's an independent leadership? It's not about the different parties?
It's not. I mean, the economic situation and the financial situation of the state is a nonpartisan or bipartisan issue. It's risk to everybody in the state. If we go bankrupt, or if we start having to cut services that are important to me, important to the people in the community, because we couldn't manage the money correctly, that affects everybody. And it doesn't matter what party you're from. It doesn't matter if you're, again, Mexican American or Chinese American or anything. We will all be in that situation together. So I argue that we should start now and all work together to try to fix it. I believe in the American system, even with just 2 parties. You know, if there is enough discussion and enough good, I would say good friction in the course of developing legislation, if it's just one party rule, then there's no reason to try to be fair in the language when you draft legislation. If the other party has enough power to impact, then party 1 has to write legislation or try to create legislation which will be acceptable in some ways to party 2, and vice versa. If party 2 is in control and party 1 has enough control, has enough presence and control in the government, so that either party 1 or party 2, they can't just take whatever they want and just go with it. If you have 2 parties, that pushing and pulling, in my opinion, creates better, more efficient, more fair legislation. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that's a good thing. So it's a bipartisan problem. It has to be a bipartisan solution, because a single party solution, we've watched. I would argue we haven't gotten the best result with just one party in control. Has enough presence and control in the government, so that either party 1 or party 2, they can't just take whatever they want and just go with it. If you have 2 parties, that pushing and pulling, in my opinion, creates better, more efficient, more fair legislation. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that's a good thing. So it's a bipartisan problem. It has to be a bipartisan solution, because a single party solution, we've watched. I would argue we haven't gotten the best result with just one party in control. Having a second party, and I don't care what party you're from, it's true regardless of what party you're from. I truly believe that 2 parties involved in the system, involved in the creation and the tension of creating legislation creates a better product.